Brad Brooks, come on up. Give him a big round of applause. All right, so here's how this evening's going to go. You got all these adoring fans. We're going to talk a little bit about your background and how you got to where you're at today, the status of what's going on with your two amazing companies, and then how you see trends. And I think we're in for a real treat for is, I really consider you the pioneer of everything happening in anonymous and the ephemeral space. And that's certainly the big trend right now in everything consumer internet, and you pretty much pioneered it. So I think we're all in for a real treat. To give you a sense of the audience, how many of you right now are currently working on your own company? As you can see, we've got about a full third of the audience. How many engineers do we have here? Right? These are the people that are going to get hog-tied and kidnapped afterwards. How many of you right now or in the next couple months are in the process, or going to start the process of fundraising? All right, so we've got a lot of people here. For all of you fundraising, Matt Coffin in the back, there's a lot of angel investing. Just going to talk to him afterwards. I believe he brought his checkbook. All right, so let's start with a quick synopsis.
He is. He's got a deep checkbook, so everyone just take
You've got two companies because one wasn't enough. Explain to the audience what TigerText is. Explain to the audience what Whisper is.
Sure. So TigerText is, we do secure text messaging for companies, for the enterprise. And Whisper is like an anonymous social network. So basically trying to kind of, change the notion of you attaching things that you may be posting on a social basis from your identity. Because there's a lot of friction associated with that.
Okay. You see some crazy shit on Whisper. Right? I mean, you go on Whisper and it's like, I was, assaulted many times as a child. I haven't told anybody. I'm here telling this anonymous world. Why do people do that?
I think it grew a lot. It's funny because Michael, who's the co-founder of the company with me, is actually in a pretty different demographic. He's
black.
He's black.
Oh, no. He's just young and Jewish. He's
No,
younger,
yeah.
right?
He's in his mid-20s, and I'm in my early mid-40s. So, but what was interesting is kind of we both had a very similar revelation around social media at the time, which was now kind of coming on like 3 years ago, which is that so much of it is complete bullshit. It is totally curated. It's your personal brand that you're putting out there. And it's a lot of stuff that you want to just show people the best side of exactly who you are or what you're doing. And yet there was a whole other segment, and there is an importance of that obviously we all need. But the whole other segment, which arguably is maybe much, much more than what you post on social media, that is much more authentic, real, potent, and visceral in a lot of levels, that it touches you in a very kind of emotional basis that you never put. I'm married and I can't stand my wife, or I'm, in college and I want to drop out and I don't have the courage to tell my parents. Or, I'm alone, it's Saturday night, everyone else is out posting on Instagram, and here I am, and I'm not having this kind of experience. And, it's a crazy sort of thing that we're living in. We're living in a crazy, crazy world that we don't even realize how fast things are moving and how the impact that we're having more importantly, that people that we don't even know the impact that they can be having on our life and our emotional state. That someone can be sitting in Syria and post a video of beheading someone, send it out, mass broadcast it, and it can really affect your emotional state on that given day, right? It can inject like a certain amount of anxiety to millions of people. They never would have had that opportunity, which is, there's a blessing and a curse with mass media. And on a personal level, when you bring it back to kind of individuals, that, there's, as a result, I think everyone here, because we are all curating what we're doing so carefully, we really are very mindful of that we're only showing this one segment. And if we could sort of disintermediate identity with all that stuff, that there's this amazing opportunities to connect to people in ways that we've never done before.
I've heard you and Michael talk about the fact that people go to places like Facebook and Twitter to brag, and they take these little slices of their life to make it seem like it's better. And folks go to Whisper to tell the honest truth of what's going on in their life that they maybe sometimes can't tell anybody else.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those circumstances where you're like, you know, here I am at the Laker game. Here I am, whatever, you know, on Startups Uncensored, and look how great my kids are. Like, I see all these parents who post all this stuff, and you would think like, oh, they're the most doting parents, but yet when they're with their kids, they're actually on their cell phone the whole time posting stuff about their kids' experience. It's like this whole kind of meta experience that we're dealing with, and how do we...
You feel like everywhere you go now, you have to record. You have to think of what's the perfect moment.
What's
for
the
me to
perfect
share.
moment? I was with a friend of mine who, you know, people you think ostensibly have it all together or whatnot, don't really. But yet you're seeing this prism that they're directing to you, and it creates like anxiety to you, right? And you have this whole thing of FOMO, of fear of missing out, of you know, God, my life sucks. And actually, we're all dealing with the same stuff. We are all struggling on certain levels. We have great moments, we have bad moments. And what I kind of love about Whisper is it's just like a beautiful sort of like panoply of everything. And it's not that we're just trying to kind of say, hey, look, we're all dealing with stuff, and sometimes there's incredible things, and sometimes there's really sad things, sometimes there's really funny things, and it's this more of a, what I kind of think is a true kind of spectrum of humanity.
Now, just to give everyone here a sense of how big it's got, how quickly, how long ago did you start Whisper?
We started like March of 12.
Okay, so just more than 2 years ago. And I know, I don't think you shared the number of users, but you shared the number of posts per day or week or month, right?
Yeah, I mean, now we're, you know, north of 10 billion page views a month, and millions and millions of users a month.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is that people are connecting. What, you know,
I mean,
when I see you,
by
I
all
don't.
accounts, it's one of the absolute fastest growing consumer apps of the last 5 years.
Yeah, you know, it's been an incredible ride, and we're definitely figuring things out as we go along, but I think it's one of those things that what I love is just those kind of like little intimate moments that occur every single day on the platform, that people connect and say, hey, thank you so much, like, I would have done this if I hadn't been able to communicate.
What are some examples of things that people have shared that surprised even you, right? What are things that today you go on, or that you think, oh my God, I can't believe somebody shared this?
You know what's interesting is it's actually ironic. It's actually a lot of the things that it's on both poles. It's actually things that you would think that they would share on Facebook that they don't share on Facebook, because maybe they found out their wife just got pregnant, or they just got engaged, and they don't want to hurt their friends' feelings because they are struggling, right, to have a baby. Or maybe they got into a college and they don't want their friends to know. But then it's the other spectrum of things that are sometimes so powerful, where they are, you know, struggling with a parent who's dying, and maybe they're just more timid, and they're not about broadcasting it to every single person, but they want to feel somehow a connection. We all want to have a connection to other people in the world. That's fundamentally the human condition. And we want to feel validated and have people to be vulnerable and exposed, and then to have people validate us for who we are. And I think hopefully, you know, we're providing that kind of platform that does that in a way that's honest and authentic.
So one of the absolute biggest trends of the last year plus, 2 years now in the internet has been this idea of anonymous sharing, right? Our lives have become so public, and now the pendulum started to swing into a way where people don't disassociate their lives from the web, but they just share anonymously. Obviously, you have Snapchat that's credited with ephemeral sharing, right? You send a piece of content that then disappears and goes away, just like a conversation would. But it was really you that started this with TigerText, which I think came out of the whole Tiger Woods scandal. Can you talk about how you kind of saw
Not really, but everyone kind of always associates it. It's been like a running issue. Yeah, we did end up.
How did you see this trend, and how did you jump on it?
Well, it's a funny thing, because kind of what happened was I originally had operated and ran a different company, built it up, we took it public and sold it, and I went and
you ran Inspector Gadget.
I ran Inspector Gadget, yeah, Deke Entertainment.
All right, so if any of you how many of you watched Inspector Gadget growing up?
Good, I like it.
I remember at the end the little DIC, like, that was?
There you go. So, yeah, what happened was I grew up with actually the founder of that company, the guy who created Inspector Gadget, and we built it up together. I grew up next door to him. He was older than me, and he asked me to join him, and we ended up building the company up and taking it public and selling it. And then at that point, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and was sort of hanging out, and I went and sort of was kind of like an EIR to an investment bank here in LA, as I was kind of hanging out and trying to figure out what my next step was. And I was working there, and what was interesting was there's all kinds of crazy regulations in the financial business that you have to archive now, all communication. Everything must be completely archived. And the guys there actually went to kind of really an extreme measure and even recorded all phone conversations that you would have if you were going to be trading or doing anything related to securities. And what I began to kind of realize, it was like a crazy sort of Orwellian kind of experience if you start to feel like someone is really listening in. This is pre-Snowden, right? Turns out they're really listening in. But on a company level, that they were listening in and recording all my conversations and all my emails, and everything was being archived. And it starts to kind of make you a little bit paranoid on some level, but also feeling like...
You realize this is being recorded, right? There are
Right.
video cameras right
It's okay.
there.
I don't mind.
Okay.
And feeling like, gosh, this is crazy that, can you imagine, think about this, and I think it's really important that people understand the ramifications of all this, that like any snippet, you can take out of context, God forbid, like we go back in 10 years and I pull out one 30-second segment of something that you say on the phone or an email, I can pretty much craft a picture about you in a way that I want to that may not really represent who you are, that could be potentially very out of context and in a very weird way, kind of, for someone who has maybe not great motives. And being in a company where everything was being archived and recorded, it just kind of made me feel very conscious about what I'm putting out there. And right at that point where I kind of maybe had that realization is really when the iPhone came out. And as people were kind of now using SMS, and everyone's just sending SMS, whatever, no one's paying attention to the fact, hey, maybe you could be looking at something down the road, not even immediately,
every
but
deposition,
everything,
lawsuit,
e-discovery, every
subpoena your
single
text.
thing. Yeah, it's a crazy situation, right? And it kind of comes a little bit back to what I was talking about with Whisper, which is probably how we ended up with Whisper. And so I came up with this idea with my brother, like, gosh, what if you could why should everything be permanent? Why should a sender send something and immediately lose control? As soon as you hit the send button, it's gone. And that's it. The recipient at that point can do anything they want with it. They can save it, print it, forward it, everything else. And gosh, like we all do things in the heat of the moment or whatever that might be, and it's a crazy kind of existence. And the paradigm shift I felt was, if you could, as a sender, control how long a message would live, that's an amazing shift, right? That's totally putting a different spin on communication.
But what was the very first version of TigerText? It was for the consumer, right? It wasn't enterprise.
Yeah, well,
it was meant that if I text you,
Yeah, yeah.
and then it's going to disappear from your phone.
100%, which is still the case. And
So you can still use it as a consumer?
you can still use it as a consumer today. But what ended up happening was, so as we brought it out, we kind of caught wind because of the whole TigerText, the whole Tiger Woods crazy scandal, and the media kind of just immediately embellished it.
But you didn't name it TigerText before.
I did.
No, you didn't.
No, I
Are
didn't.
you
I
serious?
swear. I'm serious.
Are you serious?
Of course. No, I totally
Best name ever. Wow.
Well, no.
Did you create that scandal? Did you fucking create that scandal?
You have
blow
to
up
ask
your
Ellen.
company?
I can't, Ellen Nordegren. No, it was one of those kind of like crazy sort of confluence of things.
How did you come up with the name TigerText before the Tiger Woods scandal?
No, it's alliterative. It's sort of like tigers are fast, and you're kind of like, moving, and everything like that. I'm serious. So we ended up like releasing it, but what became really clear, which is sort of interesting from a sociology point of view, is my conclusion was that privacy is actually not viral to a big degree. That I may be very sensitive to something that's around an issue and want to be very discreet about it, and you may be my best friend. You may not share that same sensitivity to it. That you may say, who gives a shit? Like, whatever. And I think that's...
But play that out. What's the consequence of it? What does that mean?
Well, the consequence of that was that at the time, that because we required at the time symmetrical download of the app, that you need inherently virality. And that the consumer, at that stage, it was like, smartphones were like maybe like 35%
So one person
penetrated.
would sign up, but just because one person signed up and used TigerText with his or her friends, it wouldn't get them to sign up.
It wouldn't get them necessarily to want to sign up because they're like, I don't care about self-destructive messaging. It doesn't matter to me.
Can you talk about that a bit more? Because I think one of the things that is so powerful with consumer applications is this idea that if you create something that naturally by itself has a viral component and then it works, it just grows exponentially. And I think, for all the folks here that are working on mobile applications, that could be really helpful. What wasn't viral about TigerText that maybe is viral about Whisper? Yeah,
no, I think it's a good question. I think it's always like a product meeting a market at the right time. And that adage, like, you can tell a pioneer because it's a person with the arrows in their back, that it's really, you may have the right idea, but it's got to have the right timing and the right packaging. And if it's not exactly that, sometimes you can just be a near miss, and you just kind of skirt off the edge of the atmosphere.
How did you decide to do a pivot from consumer to enterprise for TigerText?
It wasn't really a pivot per se in the way that like people might think, where you kind of like you're going down a path and you make a right turn. It was actually very conscious that I think we wanted to dual path things. I believe a lot in sort of this notion of optionality and how you make bets and how you sort of spread your bets, kind of like poker. And I think that I felt that there was something around, definitely there was a notion on consumer, but I also knew that where there would be clear, where virality didn't necessarily matter was in the enterprise side, because they clearly had a reason to protect information. And from there, I knew I wanted to kind of dual path it, and I would kind of make a selection at a certain point down the road.
So can you give an example of a company that uses TigerText and the context in which they have their employees use it?
Yeah, so today, what ended up happening was we kind of went down a route, and we looked at like every vertical in the enterprise space, and pretty quickly healthcare kind of bubbled up to the top for us, because a variety of different things that kind of all came together around, doctors were way over-indexed to the rest of the population in terms of smartphone penetration. They were using SMS to a much bigger degree in their workflow because they don't really want to give out their mobile number to people. They give it out to very select people. And sort of when you think about with SMS, you use it as a priority channel. And that's why we all gravitate to SMS much faster than we do email, because we've opted in select people out of our address book to get messages. And then the third kind of big issue was that SMS is just fundamentally, you're not allowed to use it. It's not compliant with HIPAA, which is the privacy regulation. So you had this sort of, all these circumstances all dovetailing together that made it really clear that I knew that there would be a lot of applications in a lot of different enterprise verticals, but that one was screaming as
And so the
we
message
need to
stays
solve
there
it.
until somebody recognizes that they saw it, and then when they do, how soon afterwards does it disappear?
Well, so what's basically evolved is we allow the company to set the lifespan of the messaging, and it self-destructs after whatever
Got
they
it. So
they
the
determine.
company says whatever period
They
of time.
set it, and then they have the option to archive the communication on their side or not.
How do you, and are you personally, Brad, using TigerText to communicate with your friends personally and your family
I
personally?
use it, basically it's my default communication because I'm probably just more sensitized to these sorts of things.
But I don't need to have it on my end, right? I just get a SMS that then disappears.
Correct. So today we don't require symmetrical download. I can send you a message, it'll go to your SMS. You basically launch a browser and you can reply back to me and not have to
And
download
do
the
people that you text think, wow, you're kind of shady, you're saying, or?
Well, it's interesting.
Or do you think this is just, will this be the thing that, the guy or girl that sends a disappearing text message is seen as shady, but just like online dating, then it becomes a norm? Is this going to be the way that we're all communicating with each other in 5 years, that all text messages and emails disappear, or a large portion of them?
No, I just think there's a place for both. And I think that this paradigm of ephemeral messaging has a very big place. And I think when you look at social networks and the permanence of what you're doing, I had an experience.
I just realized I drank your used scotch. That was
thank
pretty
you very
gross.
much, by the
Sorry.
way.
I wish I could make that moment disappear.
No, I had this really interesting experience with my daughter's going into 7th grade, and a friend of hers, a parent called me flipping out. And this is kind of like the world that we live in, where she was using a cell phone. She had her cell phone. A friend said, "Oh, I want to enter in my contact info into your cell phone. Do you mind if I'll just take it and enter it in?" And while she's doing that, she sees this sort of odd girl down the hallway, right, dancing to herself, doing something kind of really weird, right? And she takes the cell phone and records the video and goes, "Oh, I'm just going to send it to myself," right? And immediately, that's like a viral moment, right? Where this girl who's, whatever, she's eccentric or who knows what could be going on with her, is dancing by herself in the hallway. This girl just thinks it's funny and doesn't really they don't know the implications of what that means. I mean, they're 7th grade, right? For God's sake, they don't have any governor or maturity to understand. And then now it's gone viral, and that video of this girl, now everyone's laughing at the girl, and that's a crazy thing, right? That's the world that we live in. And we all make fun of it on some level, but on another level, don't we all have moments that thank God they weren't recorded on social media, right? I mean, if I did, I literally, who knows where I'd be today. So I think that it's a really weird juxtaposition. We're giving these weapons of almost mass destruction to everyone and saying, "Oh, go forth, go have fun," and yet we're calling them to task on things that aren't socially appropriate, and yet there's a lot of people that have no governors and no understanding of what that means, and it's a weird situation that we're living in. And I think that there is a place for ephemerality in a big way, and I think, candidly, it's funny because my...
And just to clarify, when we say ephemerality, content or messages that disappear.
That disappear, because a friend of mine came to me and said, "Oh, my kid wants to get Snapchat, should I get it?" And I'm like, 100%. God forbid. I want everything recorded of what my kids are doing or your kids. You should want them to be expunged and have that kind of freedom, so to speak. And for the same token, that's sort of the evolution of where Whisper came into play.
Let me ask you, does it create any false sense of security? Because many of it, the content doesn't actually disappear. In many cases, they're still on somebody's server, somewhere saved and archived, and in the case of a lawsuit, can be discoverable, and so...
Not really with us. I mean, I can't speak, and I know Snapchat's gone to different lengths to address it, but pretty much with us, you cannot get it back. We don't have any ability. Maybe there's some forensic genius who can figure it out, but we've had a
So
lot
if
of...
I post something on Whisper and then I get subpoenaed, there is no way to trace what I post on Whisper back to my account other than seeing my cell phone, or?
Yeah, the only thing we track on Whisper, we do have a device ID, which is very important because I think philosophically on Whisper, we created it with an understanding and thought process that, look, anonymity is very much like a two-edged sword. It's an amazingly beautiful, powerful thing, and like anything, it can be used for really negative things. And Michael and I very much always believed at the very beginning, like, we don't want to be responsible for people doing things that are really mean, and bullying and hurting people unnecessarily. And it's not bullshit. That's really how we've tried to manage the business. And candidly, we've kind of forgiven or gone a lot of growth that we probably could have had if we wanted to take sort of the cheap way to
So can you
grow.
talk about that? Can you talk about some of the things in Whisper that prevent that anonymous cyberbullying?
Yeah, so we do track you at a device level. So we don't know who you are, but we know your device. And so if you're a bad actor...
It's like an IP address.
Yeah, it's an IP address. So if you're a bad actor, but the difference with IP address is it's really easy on a desktop, which is why you can only create things on mobile for Whisper. You can always go to another computer.
Yes.
And the difference with the mobile phone is you got to get rid of your cell phone. So if we identify you as a bad person that's doing things that are really hurting other people, that are trying to bully or do things that are violating kind of basic community standards, then we can effectively ban you.
Do you personally share on Whisper?
All the time.
What's an example of something you shared?
That defeats the purpose of Whisper.
Is there one? Is there one you could share, or what's something? What's a category of something you would share?
It's
and
funny.
There's a reason I asked.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not a big social media poster. I'm extremely inactive on Facebook, maybe because I'm just sort of like hyper aware and really not active at all on Twitter. But it might be things like, things that are very intimate about me or my wife or my kids or things like that, that I don't want, I'm not doing it to, serve up to my social connections. Because I kind of I see a lot of what comes out of those places from other people that I see that are putting things up, and I know it's bullshit. And I know that they're posting things that are just contrived or superficial, or not superficial, but just things that they know that are not the reality. Because I know some of them, a lot of times I know who they are and what's really going on, and I'm like, like this one parent is like posting all these things about their kid the whole summer, and yet I know the kid literally spent no time with them the entire summer, was in summer camp like for 90 days straight. And you would think, looking at the Facebook, that they've got this incredible relationship with their kid and like they're going here, and it's all baloney. And like, I don't know, I just have this compass for authenticity that I just feel like I get a natural aversion to those kinds of things. And so I like to just do things that are for me and sort of for my internal compass, and then that's it.
The reason I asked that is, so a lot of you still hadn't had a chance to see Whisper. My personal experience was, I remember when I first went on it, you read the stories and these short little clips of what people share, and your first thought is, I cannot believe people share this. And it took me maybe 4, 5, 6 times, and then one time I just thought, I'm just going to share something. And as soon as you do, it's the most cathartic moment, just knowing that something that you don't normally talk about is out there in the ether.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stand up and be like, I am woman, hear me roar.
Right. No, and
it's incredibly powerful, actually.
It's because it's like it's a basic tenet of psychotherapy.
That was my Whisper. I am woman, hear me roar. That's what I posted.
Right, I like it. That's a.
I got you.
More time,
I got you.
Jason.
Have a drink. Have a drink on that.
That's a very interesting one. So, I think it is. It's, as I said, kind of like we all want to be seen in our most unvarnished, raw state and not be pushed aside or made fun of, right? And I think if we can feel that, like the world is a much better place.
Yeah. Is it the thing that trips me out though is, for the first time in the history of the world, you have to monetize a business where you have no fucking idea who your customers are. I mean, do you think about that? I mean, you literally, all the people that use my service, I have no idea who they are, but I'm going to have to make money off of this one day. What are your thoughts on that, and how a business, not just for you all, but for all of these platforms, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that the thing is with Whisper is what we benefit from, because we reduce friction to such a big degree, because there's no sign up, and anyone can come on and post anything, and we have like north of 50% of the users who post things. And so as a result,
that, by the way, is insane. Are you think north of 50% of everybody who signs up shares?
We know.
Yeah.
So
just as a baseline of comparison.
Yeah.
Right, and this may be something so special that you're onto, right? If you look at traditionally any user-generated content network, YouTube, sites like Docstoc, you typically have less than 2% of the user base that ever contributes anything. Yelp, right? The vast majority of people consume. A tiny percentage of people contribute.
Right.
What is it about Whisper that creates so much contribution?
Well, I think it's one, I credit sort of the genius of Michael Hayward, who's the CEO, and around the product and the onboarding, that it just gets you into the flow and you can create, and we don't ask you for anything up front. The only thing we ask you at the end of your creation period of creating something is just, do you want a pin to sort of, you need to enter in a pin so you can secure, so you basically create a vault in the app. And I think that has been that onboarding flow is really, really vital to doing as much as possible to sort of lower down the friction kind of barrier. Mm-hmm. And then it is this notion that we don't really care who you are. You can change your username if you want. And when you do create, the other thing is, because so many people are creating, there's actually so many people responding to you. It's like a crackling ecosystem that people,
that is a crazy thing. You get so many responses right away.
You saw it, right?
It's crazy.
It's amazing. And it's so validating, because a lot of times you'll end up sharing things that maybe you've never literally put out loud, even verbally, and you share in your phone, and then to get a response from someone who says, oh my God, I thought I was the only person who felt that way, it's a very, very validating experience. And you feel, what's so fascinating, I love about Whisper, is you realize that we're much more similar than we are actually isolated. And there's this total irony with the world today that we're so connected on so many levels, and yet we're so apart and we're so alienated. Everyone's so buried in their phone. They're so involved in their own little world, and we're not really interacting on a true level. And it's amazing. Like, it's a really, really, to me, I'm so proud of kind of that aspect of the business and kind of what we've created there.
So let's go back and talk about the business. So not just necessarily for Whisper, but for any company that's in the business of anonymous content sharing, what are going to be the natural business models that evolve from it?
There's so many, because you end up creating, because there's so much content for us, we're an interesting kind of like hybrid, that there's a tremendous amount of social interaction going on. We're sending literally tens of millions of text messages a day between people, private text messages. And then in addition, we are, because people are so free and they're creating so much content, and incredible content that's unique, that's not like anything that you see on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, that's content that we effectively have in our ability to syndicate out and share with other content partners. So we have some amazing relationships, like with BuzzFeed and HuffPo and just a whole slew of different kind of sites out there that they've never seen content like this. Yeah. And so we have an ability to kind of continue to aggregate that, and then over time, I think there's a lot of different ways. For us, we're not really that concerned, candidly, about monetization. It's more just around how do we economically scale in a smart way.
One of the things that I've been interested about, and maybe if you've seen these or you think Whisper is in part going to go in the direction, this idea that something will happen topically in the world, a news event, something, and then there'll be a platform where a lot of people commentate on it anonymously. It seems like that's one anonymous platform that hasn't become more ubiquitous yet. Is that a direction you're heading in, or you seen other folks do that?
On that front, it's what we're really interested in is the eyewitness accounts that are unvarnished that you haven't seen on, say, CNN or whatever it might be, whatever news outlet. We've had some amazing things where, like, an Israeli soldier posted when those 3 teenagers were kidnapped and they were found. Actually, the guy posted on Whisper probably 5 or 6 hours before it became known. Hey, we found the bodies and they're here and they're dead. And it was like a really interesting sort of eyewitness glimpse of someone, and you knew it was real, and we vetted it that we saw on the platform, and that kind of eyewitness account is for us very fascinating and something that we think that has a huge amount of value.
How will you verify that going forward that those are real accounts happening? I mean, is it going to be a photo? Someone's going to upload a photo.
There's a photo. There's geolocation. There's history of the user. There's a lot of different elements that we can do to verify, and sometimes we'll even reach out to the user and then enter into sort of a private message conversation.
What's the algorithm in Whisper that decides because there's no concept of followers, right? So you
Yep.
put something out there.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily connected to anybody in your social graph.
Yeah.
So you put something out there, and presumably there's some algorithm that's saying, well, this is trending, more and more people are viewing and commenting on it, it gets shown to more people.
Yeah.
How does that process work so that you really surface the most interesting content?
Yeah, and that's really where now, as we're getting to scale, where we're investing a lot of time, effort, money, and so forth, is we're building out a massive sort of data science effort to understand not only what may be trending, but also what may be relevant to you. Because what Jason Nazar cares about may not be what Matt Coffin cares about, may not be what XYZ person kind of cares about. And I think that for us, right now, initially we kind of set up Whisper as more or less like a global river of content, and over time want to kind of start to serve up things that we think you're probably more interested in, based on either what you've liked, what you've posted, or things like that, so that you can feel like you're finding like-minded, or not like-minded, but just more content that's akin to what things that you might be interested in.
And I always thought it'd be really cool, I told you this, if you could follow somebody anonymously. So both the follower is anonymous and the person creating the content has a number of anonymous followers. Because I'll see a post on Whisper and I'll think, wow, that's a really great post. I want to see what other content, but you explained to me that comes with some challenges, right? Some problems.
The notion of following, what ends up happening kind of when you take it down as logical progression.
You think people won't be as honest, right?
Exactly. And you end up then curating because, now I've got 20,000, 100,000 followers, and they know me for this kind of trail of content. I'm going to start to continue to post things that kind of run along that thing. And I think the real power and beauty of Whisper is that free-flowing moment that comes out of anyone at any point in time, that you never can predict where it is. And we all have these moments actually all day long, and they're in the back of our mind, and they flip through, and they're sort of like these fleeting seconds. And if we can sort of capture that and get that going, like I remember this one post, it's funny, it's still stuck in my mind, like 2 years later, like a woman like early on posted this really like beautiful photograph of her. It was like a black and white photo, and you could see because she was like holding onto the steering wheel, and it was like the shot of like an empty like Walmart parking lot, and it was sort of like that moment where you just can't bear getting out of your car to go to work, right? And you could see it was sort of like 7 a.m. She was probably beginning her shift. You just had all these elements that were kind of speaking to you about who this person was, what they were, and we all have kind of like felt that.
What was the caption?
That moment when you just can't bear to get out of the car. And it's not that was like so unique or crazy, but more just it was like the marriage of kind of like the words and the image, and it was really like, it's just something that I think I felt, that a lot of people have felt, or something where
That's
you're just
a beautiful
like,
piece of content, yeah.
right. And yet it's something that ordinarily you would never post that on Instagram, you wouldn't put that on
Yeah.
Facebook, and it's like a cool thing that maybe yeah, I get it, I'm with you. And that maybe she gets a ton of
When's
responses.
the search functionality coming? I'm dying to be able to just, like, when can you actually search
well,
for
that's
specific
there,
keywords?
that's there already, but we're really optimizing around,
It's a lot more of a
the next
browse,
big
right?
thing is really around affinity groups.
Got it.
And
yeah.
being able to find things that are around certain pools of content
Okay.
that
So
is going to be kind of huge.
Let's talk about the quick status of the companies. How many employees do you have at TigerText?
We're up to about 90.
9 employees. And the
Yeah.
company's 4 years old now?
Yes. Yeah.
And how much have you raised in venture capital?
So far, we raised about 35 million.
Okay. And Whisper, how many folks do you have?
We're up to about 6. Well, it depends. I mean, 60 plus we have a massive moderation effort, content moderation effort.
Got it. And that company's almost 2.5 years old. How much money have you raised for Whisper?
About 65 million.
Got it.
Yeah.
So talk about that process a little bit. You hadn't been in tech, right? I think you started off in investment banking.
Yep.
Then you bought Dick Productions.
Yep.
What else was in Dick Productions besides Inspector Gadget?
I mean, it was a whole huge library of content, which was kind of
all animation.
All animation. So like Sonic the Hedgehog, Madeline, you know, Inspector Gadget. Beverly
How
Hills
did you grow
Teens,
that from a $10 to $80 million business? What did you do?
You know, it was really, at the time, it was a thesis like, let's buy the library, you know, be able to monetize the library, because it was owned by Disney, and they really weren't actively focused on monetizing the library and distributing it. But then in addition, let's really start to produce and create brands that we can license. And it was really predicated on the ability to create licensing, and we ended up really acquiring and bringing out, again, Strawberry Shortcake. So it was kind of one of those very fortuitous things where the kids that really loved Strawberry Shortcake as girls, 20 years later were moms, and wanted to kind of have that experience again for their kids.
And then you took the company public.
We took the company public, and yeah.
IPO?
We took, sorry?
Was it an IPO?
Yeah, it was an IPO, and it was an amazing ride. I mean, it was like a 6-year kind of process through buying it, building it up, and then taking it public and then selling it.
So here you are, you're in your, what, mid to late 30s at the
Yeah,
time?
mid-30s,
And you jump into tech for the first time. What was that experience like? And, you know, clearly you've had a lot of success very quickly. You have 2 very fast-growing companies. You've raised close to $100 million.
Yeah.
What's that process been like? And, you know, what advice would you have for the half of the audience in here that's working on their own companies?
Yeah. Don't do it. No. You know, it's very, I really have huge respect for anyone who's not only trying to do it, but also trying to do it in LA. It is extremely challenging on a number of levels. I equate it, kind of my metaphor is, it's like trying to make a movie in San Francisco. And so you know, because it's sort of like a metaphor that I understand, having kind of worked in the entertainment media business, that if I were to show up here and I may have like the best script, and maybe I'm not a like proven director or producer, but I've done stuff in other places, so I know how to basically get it done, and I come to the studio and they're going to be like, you know, are you represented by CAA? Are you represented by William WME or whatever? You know, who are you? You know, forget it. And in a lot of ways, I didn't realize quite that degree, but I think it's a fairly accurate metaphor for doing something here on where the epicenter is, which is really in Silicon Valley, and how they view things down here.
What's your perception of how, having raised a lot of money outside of LA now, what's your perception of how it's viewed?
I think there's just, generally speaking, like a raised eyebrow around what's going on down here. I think there's been a lot of false starts and a lot of people who have been kind of pretenders to the crown, and that show up and wave their hands and want to hype and say, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing, and this is Hollywood meeting Silicon Valley, or whatever that might be, whatever spiel that they come up with. And what ends up happening is people have been burned, but also there's fundamentally, there's a dearth of talent down here, engineering-wise, that it's hard. It's really, really hard. And you're coming up with a notion or an idea, and no matter how much credibility you may have as a business person or whatnot, it's just they don't really believe you unless you really have, complete, absolute proof. And I think the barrier, the hurdle for that proof is much, much lower in Silicon Valley. If I have a DNA and I'm coming out of Google or Facebook or Yahoo, whatever XYZ kind of tech company, they give you much more the benefit of the doubt. That, oh, you're there, okay, therefore I know you're kind of real, and I'm going to believe more of your bullshit than maybe I should, And versus LA, they're like, oh, screw it, or there's a lot of people up there who say, I don't, big VC firms who are like, I don't want to fund people down in LA. Fundamentally, we just have decided we're not going to fund it. We need them near here. So it's very, very challenging, and you really need that core kind of technical group that's going to stick with you, and you need capital that's going to also see you through as you're kind of iterating, because in a way you have a much less of a margin for error because you don't have that kind of like benefit of them knowing who you are. Are
there any key lessons in the fundraising process you learned that you would pass on to the folks here as they're fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that you've got to sort of be very, very locked in, I think, with your technical team very, very early on. It's not enough to just have an idea and a concept and think that you're going to get funded, because you're just not going to, being in LA in particular. There's just too many variables on variables that create too much sort of risk in the eye of the investor. I think it's as much if you can find, for me, it was benefiting from people who knew me and who knew what I was kind of, from a business point of view, what I'd accomplished, and were willing to fund me that weren't necessarily from that Silicon Valley VC DNA, that were willing to kind of take that level of risk. And those kinds of things are, having that kind of technical team and kind of maybe sources of capital that might be outside of Silicon Valley, I think are really, really important, because ultimately I kind of feel that the VC sort of pool of capital here is fairly shallow, and there's really not a lot of alternatives, and it's one of those things. It's very challenging to undertake. Yeah. It's getting better, and I think things are changing quickly more on the company front than they are on the VC front. I think the VC front, you'll start to see that mature more over the next few years. It's a much better environment today than it was, say, 3 years ago, but it still remains, I think, a challenge.
And so you're in a really interesting situation that I think would be interesting for our audience. You founded a company that you're still running as CEO, and then you have another company that you've co-founded that you're not there day-to-day operationally.
Yep.
How do you balance that, and I'm assuming you're on the board, right, of Whisper?
Yep.
What's that like for you to have two companies, but one that you're not in a full-time operational role on it, and why did you do that to yourself?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is, number one, I was very fortunate that I had a very competent person that I could say, you're CEO with Michael, where I knew...
And the two of you had worked together before?
Well, this is kind of like the long story. Michael is the son of the guy who founded the company, the cartoon company, and that's how we ended up meeting. And I had the benefit of sort of knowing him more on a personal level for a much longer basis, and so had a much greater degree of trust in who he was.
It's kind of cool symmetry, right? This guy mentored you, brought you in when you were early,
yeah.
And then you did the same.
We call it like the Lion King circle of life kind of
Michael
thing.
will co-found a company with your son.
Yeah, exactly. And we're all gonna sing at the end. And I think what is kind of cool is we're more like in that kind of mentorship thing, but I also know and trust him enough that it's I know he's going to kind of make
What's
the right
it
decisions.
like for you working with all 20-year-olds in this company, Whisper? I mean, you go in there.
I love it.
It's probably the youngest office in LA.
Yeah, no, I love it.
You were literally in a house.
Yeah, well, we were
in Santa
before.
Monica. You moved,
Yeah.
but you were for the first 2 years. You were in a house in
Yeah.
Santa Monica.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons, in your opinion, of having that young in office?
These are people that are going to die for the cause, and they're true believers. And I mean that in a sincere, great way, which is everyone there understands kind of the mission of that and the expansiveness of what Whisper can be and what we're trying to build, and really believe it to a T. And I think it's reflective in the culture, which I think Whisper needs that kind of commitment. You just don't build things like this half-assed. It just doesn't happen. And I think that we, and I credit Michael, like we've really built an incredible culture there of people who truly understand what's involved and want to do what it takes to get it to that level.
That's great. One of the things I think would be really interesting is the origin of when Whisper really started taking off, right? So I think everyone in this room who's in business for themselves would love to have an application that grew as quickly, as virally, and as popularly as Whisper. So talk about that first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. When did the growth really start to kick in? And what would you attribute it to, and what lessons can you directly tell the folks here that they could apply in their projects?
No, that's a great question. I think I kind of believe that in consumer businesses that you very much need to see kind of like a lightning in a bottle at a very early stage. And if you don't see that lightning in a bottle, you better pivot really quick, and you better find it in some way, shape, or form on the consumer side.
How early is early?
Early, like we knew within our first 2,000 to 3,000 users, because we could see the levels of engagement of what they were doing and how they were interacting with the product.
Explain that. How long did it take to get those 2,000 to 3,000 users, and what were they doing that you thought, wow, there's something really unique here?
Probably, within the first, I'd say like 60, 90 days. And they were, average user was spending like 30 minutes a day inside of the app,
wow.
Posting, at the percentages that we were just talking about. And really, you could just see, it wasn't just 30 minutes straight, but they'd come in for 3-4 minutes, but they were coming back 8 times a day.
How did people first, because especially with a purely mobile app, right, discovery is hard, it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. There was nothing in the name that people were intuitively typing into iOS or Android. How did the first 10,000 people even discover Whisper?
We kind of did like a bunch of just random tests. To be honest, like a lot of times, I wish I could tell people there's no magic formula, and I would be lying to you if I told you there was. It's a lot of like, in those early stages, like you're in a dark room and you're kind of feeling around for the light switch to try to figure out where it is. But when you get those threads, those sort of like green shoots where you kind of know that something's going on, you really have to have a very kind of clear, radar for listening to that, and then doubling down and tripling down on what you're seeing there. And pretty much with us, as I said, kind of we saw it very early on, and we thought we were very unique on.
Specifically, though, what were some of the early playing around in the dark things you did? What did you try?
We thought, well, should we try to get some like a woman who knows these celebrities, and is that the right way? Or which turned to be like totally polar opposite of really how it would drive. And ultimately, where we started to see some tremendous uptake, because we started to realize that there was a huge value to Whisper in locality. And specifically, we started seeing there was one college campus that started uptaking to Whisper very quickly.
Because the weird thing is, it's not like you ask somebody to go follow a post, right? It's not like you're sharing a specific piece of content because it's anonymous. So were you just finding that people were telling their friends, hey, you got to check this out, it's really cool?
It wasn't as much as like, oh my God, I'm in this very, because everyone is so tightly kind of, there's a density to a college campus where everyone's living. And because we started then segmenting by locality, by what's nearby, you could see, and there was a much more of like this visceral response around, oh my God, this person's within a mile of me and they posted this, and they're really much, you could tell that they're from your college campus. And then it started to create that kind of like viral element that started then spreading, from campus to campus. And sort of what's interesting about Whisper is, like, no one, and this is kind of another lesson, which is Silicon Valley does not know the answers to everything. And you should never confuse the fact that there's money and engineers there with that fact, because fundamentally they'd never heard of Whisper for well north of a year. And we had already passed, like, I think close to like approaching like 1 million users, and we'd never been reached out to, or no one had ever heard of us anywhere there, because it wasn't in their sphere. It was actually spreading kind of in college campuses all throughout the Midwest and
Which
South.
makes it a lot more valuable business.
Which in turn, and it's funny because like I've read stuff like about Pinterest, and it was a similar kind of thing where no one in Silicon Valley was using Pinterest for the first year and a half, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, Pinterest, and it's one of those things that you kind of just have to be really dialed into what's happening with your product, and are you iterating to kind of find those signals. And then when you find those signals, then you're doubling and tripling down
And
around
so
them.
how do you think now, because you've had a couple different copycats come after you, you've really created a category. How do you think about staying the number one player, right?
Listen, it's a lot around product vision and how do we kind of create something that creates still that feeling for people, that freshness. And it's not simple, it's not easy, and I think it's really about hopefully kind of remaining humble and trying to continue to iterate and feel that kind of sense of urgency that we did at the very beginning. And I still feel really great about everything, which is why it comes back to culture, and that as you start to kind of move from that startup phase to more that middle phase, how do you hopefully keep people to maintain that sense of urgency? It's really, really vital. Otherwise, you dissipate and you start reading your own press clippings, and then you're over as fast as you were there.
All right. So last question I've got for now. Talk about your management style. I mean, you're an old pro at this now, right? This is business number 3 for you. What are the things that you've learned about management? What's your management style, and what would you advise to the folks in the audience?
I think, for me, it's
Seem
really
pretty laid back all the time I see you.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's easy. I think the number one thing that I'm focused on is really just being authentic to who I am. And I think people give you the benefit of the doubt that if you really are being authentic, and it doesn't mean that I'm always nice, it doesn't mean I'm not there to be their best friend, but I'm telling them exactly what I feel, and that they believe fundamentally in my vision of where we're taking it, and that I'm communicating in a way that is consistent. I've been around so many people that are so inconsistent, and I just, as I said kind of before, I sort of have this total aversion to it. And I think that if you can hopefully...
I like it that you said authenticity compass. It's a much nicer way of saying bullshit meter. Authenticity compass.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's just so much of it out there of people that are trying to manipulate you or get you to do certain things. And I actually think people give you the benefit of the doubt. You can actually deliver much worse news to people if they believe you're being on the level. And we actually don't give our fellow humans enough credit or benefit of the doubt on those lines, that they know that, it doesn't mean that you're all out there for everything or fully transparent, because there's certain things that are just, it's more that you're consistent around what it is that you're communicating. And when you do that, then I think we all, kids love consistency, I think adults love consistency. And I think that is something that is a lot of times comes with a lot of self-awareness. I was talking to good friends with Brandon Beck, who runs Riot Games, and I love the fact that they're very into. So I was talking to one of his recruiters today about what they look for, and they talked a lot about self-awareness, and and humility, and that you are self-aware enough to know, hey, like one of my favorite interview questions is, what have you screwed up on in your career, and what did you learn from it? And I really want, if someone can tell me something that is true and real, like I met someone today and told me a great answer, something she was young, she was working at this company here in LA, and she screwed up and got too much responsibility, and what she learned from it, and I was like, done, you're hired. Like, because I just felt like she had told me something that was truly kind of like next level, and it was something that I view as valuable because I want people to know that it's okay to fail, and more importantly, that you're learning from your failures so that you're not going to do it. And how are we iterating together? Okay. And it's a hard thing. It's a really tricky thing for hopefully people to be kind of honest with themselves about and honest with everyone else about.
That's a great point of view.